Professor Bianchi for this very kind introduction. Let me share my screen. Could you see my
Sure.
screen?
Maybe just a sec. Yes, perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning from Italy, and thank you to be here for to this seminar. So today, yes, I will talk about an idea of how it's important the metrology for the assessment of the performance optical sensor, but specifically I will focus on optical fiber device, which is my main expertise, and I will show you some example in a real life context. So this is the outline of the presentation. So I will give you some brief information about my institute and the group which I belong to. And the first part of the talk will be more academic, so we'll discuss about classification in terms of type of sensing and the parameter that can be used for an objective assessment of the sensor performance. In the second part, I will show you some interesting and recent example of fiber-based optical sensor apply to real-life applications and contexts, and then I will provide some food for thought and conclusion. So where we are, so this is Italy, okay, in the center, more or less, Italy, in Tuscany region, so close to Firenze, to Florence. Here you can see this is the, let me use the pointer. Remember how to do, okay. This is our institute here in the Siena region, and this is the scientific campus of Florence University, which is, you can see, very close to the Rhine, or the airport. And the institute to which I belong is the Institute of Applied Physics, Nello Carrara, is a part of the CNR, the largest public research institution in Italy. And in our institute, we have very broad research and experimental activities, and also development of technology transferred in many areas. So not only what is belong to me, so health, nanomedicine, and sensing, but also space, aerospace, environmental, food quality monitoring, cultural heritage. Here I just sum up the main topics and activity we are developing in our institute, which are mostly related to my research activities, are for sure biophotonics, sensor, and diagnostics. The group which I belong is called now Optical Sensing Group. Is one of the largest group in our institute. And the main focus is related to the development of biophotonics devices for diagnostics based on invasive and non-invasive devices and point-of-care and theranostics devices. We can briefly divide our activity in the group into four different topics. So fluorescence-based device, absorption-based device, label-free devices, and intracellular optical nanosensing. We are very multidisciplinary group, so we have physics, engineering, chemistry, biotechnology. This allow us to face all the different issues related to the topics we want to develop. This is a recent picture of our group. You can see we are very not only multidisciplinary but also multicultural group, so everyone is welcome. This is my author identifier, my social connection, especially in LinkedIn ResearchGate, and as completely introduced by the chairman, you can find that my main research activity here in this. This is a worldwide view of my collaborations, so not only in Italy but also in Europe and in China. So clearly, we are completely open for new venues in collaboration in the topics I will show you later. Okay, let's start the first part of this seminar. And we start with the classification of the sensor in terms of type of sensing. So we can have three different devices. So we have physical sensor that clearly measure a physical parameter and convert into an optical signal, and we can measure essentially temperature, pressure, deformation, strain, bending, humidity, and so on and so forth. Then we have chemical sensor. In this case, the device is able to determine the presence, the concentration, or quantify a chemical element of a compound. And this is some example of the typical parameter that are used in chemical sensing. So the composition of chemical element, the presence of a particular element of ion, the concentration, the electrochemical activity, and the pH sensing. Finally, we have biosensor. Biosensor can be defined as an integrated receptor transducer device that can give a selective quantitative or semi-quantitative analytical information about the investigated target analyzed using a bioecological recognition element or a bioreceptor that is deposited on a suitable substrate. In this case, we can assess the antibody-antigen interaction, the enzymatic interaction, the nuclease interaction. We can also do epigenetics modification and evaluation of cell and tissue. What mostly is concerned this webinar, I will show you some example of what we call resonance-based devices. And I will mostly focus on fiber optic devices, but clearly all the concept, especially in the first part, can be translated into any type of sensor, so optical sensor, electrical sensor, electrochemical sensor, whatever, because the parameters are very generic. But in particular, we work on resonance-based devices. So what we have, essentially, we have the light that is launched in this fiber or in any type of devices, and we collect the light at the end, and we have an optical resonance in the transmission spectrum. And usually this resonance changes as a function of environmental parameter by the effect of the modulation of the evanescent field in this device. And the change can be related to wavelength, intensity, or transmission power, phase, and polarization. This type of device can be implemented using different sensing approaches, and here just report some example. The probably well known is surface plasma resonance. And then we have localized SPR, interferometric configuration, distributed sensing, optical fiber gratings, so fiber Bragg grating, long period gratings, lossy mode resonance, and block surface wave. Let's move to the motivation of this webinar, and mostly my my greatest part of the research activity. As I told you before, optical fiber has a special class of optical waveguides, and can be suitable used to develop the sensing platform with very high sensitivity and low limit of detection in the measurement of refractive index change in the medium surrounding the fiber. Here we just report some very illustrative example of where optical fiber can be used and for different applications. So ranging from detection of physical parameter to chemical parameter to biosensing, as I told you before. And the main reason is because optical fiber have peculiarities that other types of platform can hardly offer, in particular the possibility for operando monitoring, the possibility and the capability of multiplexing multifunctionality, and the unique light control at the nanoscale level. The first paradigm shift that occur in the literature came out in 2016 from the group led by Andrea Cusano in University of Sagno in Benevento, in Italy, with the idea of lab-on fiber. So using non-optical fiber as a small and compact laboratory. And specifically, they divided this concept into three different sub-concepts under the name of lab on tip, if the sensing region of the fiber is on the tip of the fiber. Lab in fiber, meaning that we're talking about microstructure or photonic crystal fiber when the sensing occur inside the structure of the fiber, or finally lab around fiber where the sensing occur on the outside the cladding of the optical fiber. And thanks to the technology and all the advances in micro and nano fabrication in the recent year, this moved this concept to a very extreme levels with high performances optical fiber based devices. So have in mind this, we can create a kind of roadmap to develop the high performance optical fiber based devices, starting from selecting the sensing principle and the structure that support the sensing principle, the combination of nanomaterial with fiber, which is fundamental to enhance the light matter interaction in the forms of thin film, nanoparticle, nanostructure, whatever, and finally define the method and the technology for the implementation of the final device, depending clearly on the final application we want to looking for. The second motivation came out as one part of my activity starting from the PhD as the importance of the metrology in the assessment of the uniform performance of the devices, taking into account that the literature in the recent years spread a lot in this publishing concept, and so it became very fundamental to have clear and standard definition of the parameter and how to calculate them in order to compare all the literature that is present, and so to have a uniform evaluation of the performance of the device. As I told you before, all the concepts that I will talk later can be translated to any kind of devices. This story starts, I think, in 2009, probably, when I attended a doctoral school from the Italian Electronics Group in Rome. And during this school, I was impressed by the lecture given by Professor Arnaldo D'Amico, which recently passed away, which is a pioneer in the field of sensor. So I start reading this article where he focused on some standard parameter, and this allow me to continue this idea and this work, and then I continue to find in literature article that talking about this metrology in sensing. So, for instance, this is very interesting in terms of measurement of the uncertainty, but was applied to only physical sensing. And then this is another very well-known article, which unfortunately is very misleading in the concept of mixing two parameter, which is resolution and limit of detection, which is not correlated. I will show you later what I'm talking about. Then the story went on with the other types of article, mostly related to the assessment of detection limit in terms of chemical and biochemical sensing. And finally, all those things were combined to get what we published in 2016. We get also the cover from this journal, where we try to develop a uniform metrological assessment of optical sensor moving from physical sensing to chemical sensing to biosensing, so from refractometry to biosensing. Okay, let's move to this other part of this lecture. So I will focus on the parameters that can be used for the uniform assessment of the sensor performance. And we usually have a parameter of genetic interest, parameter related to bulk or volume sensing, and finally parameter related to surface sensing. So in this case, we talk about chemical sensor and biosensor. I will go very fast in this part because I think everyone knows about this fundamental parameter in metrology, so which is uncertainty, which is related to any kind of measurement we are performing. And usually we can give the standard deviation, the standard error, depending on the normal distribution of the error. Everybody knows about, and I think everybody has seen this very common graph that is used to distinguish between accuracy and precision in metrology. Another important concept, especially for the real world deployment of the devices, is the concept of stability. So what long-term stability of the device. So if the signal is stable in time, so there is any degradation of the signal. And another concept is the drift. So if the signal is not stable and for different reasons that can be related to environmental condition, we have a drift in the signal and technique to compensate and to eliminate this drift. Other two important concepts, generic concepts in metrology, are repeatability of the results, which means the agreement between a series of measurements of the same measurement, where every single measurement is performed with the same sensor under the same experimental condition. And then the second concept, which is quite different, is reproducibility, which is the level of agreement between a series of measurements of the same measurement, where every single measurement is performed with the use of different sensor of the same type. Those two parameters are especially important in clinical setting if you want to move the device from laboratory to real scenarios. Another important parameter in sensing is the response time of the device. In current world, what we need is a device which is not only reliable but also very fast in the response. The response time is defined usually from engineering point of view as the time required for the device to go from 10% to 9% of the signal, and it is also called rise time. If there is also the opposite behavior, we call usually fall time. When we talk about biosensing, this definition is slightly different, and usually is the time to reach the saturation condition or the plateau during a band interaction between the bioreceptor and the target analytes. And usually this response time biosensing depends on two different phenomena. The first, which is a very fast phenomenon, is called binding kinetics. And second, we have, sometimes, it depends, a slow phenomenon under the name of diffusion, which is longer at a lower analyte concentration. In general, this diffusion may be also related to non-specific adsorption molecule into the surface. But also in general, if we perform experiment in complex metrics, in real sample like blood plasma, serum, whatever, usually the longer the response time, the complex is the matrix due to a lower mobility of the analyte and the effect of van der Waals forces. Another fundamental concept which is important to face and to know is the distinction between bulk or volume refractive index sensing and surface refractive index sensing. In the first case, as here, We refer to optical refractometer, so a device that can distinguish the refractive index of the solution. And in this case, all the surrounding medium is involved in the sensing. In the second case, so in the surface refractive index sensing, there is just a small portion of the evanescent wave that interact with the biological or chemical layer, and so only a part is involved in this sensing. And in this case, we talk about chemical sensing and optical biosensor. So let's talk about the two most important parameters related to bulk or volume sensing, which are sensitivity and resolution. To determine sensitivity and resolution, we are to first retrieve the response time. So how the signal change as a function of the surrounding refractive index. This is an example, clearly, where we have a nonlinear change of the optical signal. So in this case, by simply deriving this optical response in terms of the refractive index, we can retrieve the sensitivity. This can be as a function of the parameter we measure, so wavelength shift, intensity, phase, polarization, whatever. But the most important thing is that we need to distinguish if the behavior is linear or not linear. If it's linear, okay, we can provide just a single value, the sensitivity, but if this signal is not linear, we can have different value, and usually we talk about average refractive index sensitivity. Then we move to the second parameter, which is important in volume sensing, which is the resolution, which is defined the smallest variation the investigating measurement at the sensing device that the sensing device can resolve. So the smallest change in the investigating measurement that produce a measurable signal change. This is defined as a parameter that is related to the confidence interval. And then we have the error, which is usually the standard deviation, and S represent the sensitivity. If we consider 99% of the error occurred in the normal distribution of the error, this becomes 3 times the sigma divided by the sensitivity. Clearly, if the sensitivity is not linear, also the resolution becomes nonlinear. So we need to define where the resolution is evaluated. Another important concept to take into account is that if here we don't use the experimental error of the system, but the optical resolution, the instrument, what we get is not the real resolution, but is the maximum theoretical resolution, since it doesn't take into account all the sources of noise as an experimental evaluation. Then we move to the surface sensing parameter, which is usually here in this paper they collect most of the most important sensing parameter, which is the limit of detection, the limit of quantification, the specificity of selectivity, the dynamic range, the response time, the reproducibility, and the stability. Again, to retrieve those parameters, we start again from the response of the device. And in this case, the common name is sensorgram. So the optical signal change versus the time. Here I just reported some example of the sensorgram. Specifically in this illustrative example, I report in the case of the bind interaction between a bioreceptor and a target analyte, there was the interaction part under the name of association constant, and then when we wash to retrieve the information of the signal, we have the dissociation constant. As I told you, when we perform, especially in label-free sensing, so where we don't have any label material, it's important to perform a rinsing step in a running buffer to retrieve the real information of the signal related to the amount of analyte that are really bound to the surface. And then when we have collected of the experimental point at different concentration, we can draw what is called the calibration curve or dose response curve, which is simply the optical signal change versus the target analyte concentration. This is a typical dose response curve. And usually we report the blank point, which is the analyte concentration, the experimental point at zero analyte concentration, and we have increasing or decreasing, depend on the sensing, concentration of the analyte till reaching usually the saturation of all the functionalities of the device. Usually in the central part, when this response is linear, we have the dynamic linear range. And from this, we can retrieve generic parameter, not only saturation level, the minimum detectability, and also the limit of detection. Since it is the limit of detection the most important parameter in chemical sensing and biosensing, there are in the literature different definition and different approaches to retrieve this and calculate this parameter. The first one belongs to the recommendation of Analytical Chemical Society that said that we need to repeat the experiment from 7 to 10 times for the blank sample and then move at increasing concentration to retrieve the entire calibration curve. And we can use this statistical equation where we have the minimum, the blank, and the statistics that is constructed using the t-student function. Another, I can say, simple but effective way is to use the recommendation given by UPAC, a standardized society that we will know in engineering as well. And LOD is defined, can be retrieved from the calibration curve by considering standard deviation, the black measurement plus the signal given by the error, so 3 times the standard deviation on the blank. By simply inverting the calibration curve, we can retrieve the concentration at the limit of detection. Finally, the last approach that is given by the paper I told you before by Sudonfan, define load considering the resolution and the surface sensitivity. As one can easily observe, this is not a correct equation because these two parameters are measured in different contexts, and also the unit of measurement consider this equation cannot give the real limit of detection, but is an approach that is used but is not correct. Here some very illustrative example where one can retrieve the detection limit from the calibration curve. If we have a linear response simply by considering the signal at the blank plus 3 times the standard deviation, go directly here when there is the fitting, and then we can retrieve the concentration L of D. If we have usually a sigmoidal trend of the calibration curve, we have again the standard deviation of the blank and the signal the blank. We consider 3 times the standard deviation and then go to the calibration curve and we can retrieve the L of D. Again, some tips related to LOD. Usually the LOD is expressed in concentration value or molarity. There is this simple equation that can be used to move from one way to the another one, just simply knowing the molecular weight of the target molecule. Again, common mistakes. Using resolution in the calculation of load. Usually, sometimes people claim a LOD which is very below the lowest concentration that is tested, which is make it quite unreliable. And LOD should not be confused with the minimum detectable concentration or detectability level. In any case, the take-home message is that you need to declare how you have calculated the LOD. Another important parameter in biosensing in chemical sensing is the selectivity or specificity, which is the capability to be sensitive to a specific or a selective measurement instead of all the other interfering measurements also called cross-sensitivity. Here are two examples of where we evaluated the specificity of the device by simply injecting like a complex metric, retrieving the signal, and showing this in the calibration curve. Clearly, if this signal is comparable with our device at the LOD, this makes the system not much reliable. But if the signal at the low concentration, the detection limit is quite higher than this, we can say that our device is quite specific. Another way to test different types of molecule and comparing the signal from the specific signal to the non-specific one, and we can see there is a big difference among them. How is possible to improve the specificity or the selectivity of the device? This is quite fundamental, especially in the translation of the device from clinical scenarios. And one way that we discover is to use like we call anti-fouling coatings. These anti-fouling coatings usually have the double advantages. One is that this can repel the not specific molecule by simply avoid the absorption of this molecule into the sensitive region. But this also give an increased number of functionalities where the target molecule can be attached. Here just provide a kind of proof of concept of how we can improve the device specificity with essentially zero or neglectable signal due to the complex matrix of plasma. Another important parameter in sensing is the possibility of reuse the device, so to regenerate the sensing surface. This parameter is defined as the capability of the sensor to be reused in consecutive assay cycles without degrading the bending capacity and the affinity of the bioreceptor. Here, just do some example of where we regenerate the biolayer, and we can detect with a very similar response a fixed concentration. And this regeneration, so this unbinding of the analyte from the bioreceptor, in this case was provided by using a solution sodium dodecyl sulfide. But there are different types of regeneration molecule, like urine, some pH, by changing the pH. There are different options. So if the question is, what is the best regeneration solution? There isn't, because we have to tailor and test which is the best regeneration solution depending on the assay and the analyte we want to detect. Okay, the first part, academic part, we can say of this webinar is close. So we move to some example of the concept that I told you since now in real life application by using optical fiber devices. This is a very illustrative picture where easy to find that optical fiber device can be used in very different scenarios. So environmental monitoring, medical diagnostics, monitoring of industrial process, and also structural health monitoring. We can develop also a system that thanks to the AI can improve in terms of data processing and analysis. And clearly this is possible thanks to the real advantages given by optical fiber. Clearly there are also some challenges that should be overcoming to completely move those kind of devices to the market. Let's start talking about physical sensing using optical fiber. In this case, the optical fiber sensing is used essentially for monitoring structural health system and engineering structures. So here There are some examples into the tunnel, in the bridges, the railway, and the aircraft. Usually, all those types of application use fiber bar gratings or fiber gratings to monitoring physical parameter like temperature, deformation, bending, so on and so forth. This is a clear example when this kind of device is applied to pipeline of tubing to monitor also the health of this structure. Another interesting example in physical sensing is the possibility of developing wearable device using optical fiber. In this case, fiber tapers are integrated into a PDMS matrix membrane to effectively monitoring the movement of the body, and this is translating in physical signal related to bending and change of the temperature. Another interesting example of using optical fiber in physical sensing is the possibility of using hydrogel fiber. Why hydrogel fiber? Because hydrogel fiber are really highly stretchable, given the young modules and the very large elongation. And this type of fiber can be used not only in physical sensing, but also in biological sensing to monitoring tissue or other types of the body. Another interesting example, still in physical sensing, I call old basic gold, is the using of combination fiber bar gratings, specifically tilt fiber bar grating, with the excitation of SPR, thanks to the deposition of a 50 nanometer layer of gold over the optical fiber. In this case, by simply looking at the TM polarization that create the combination of TFBG spectrum with the absorption of gold, we can monitor those bands close to the SPR signature, which is very sensitive to the environmental changes. In this case, this device was applied to monitoring acoustics waves for by simply converting acoustic signal into pressure change that modify the transmission spectrum of this device. And in this case, the authors report still the lowest resolution in fiber sense, which is 10 to minus 8 refractive index unit. Then moved to chemical sensing. This story started with my colleague and friend Anna Mignani in 2001, where they developed long period gratings, which is quite similar of FBG, but a different pitch that create a transmission spectrum with the resonance band at the output of the fiber, and this band are very sensitive to everything occurring around the fiber, so temperature, strain, refractive index, fiber bending, whatever. And by using this device, essentially they monitoring the change of this band as a function of different chemical solutions. It was the very first example of using optical fiber as a chemical sensing. That move and come back to the recent literature in this field. I reported this example, which is very illustrative, very interesting, because there is a combination of different types of micro nano fabrication together with materials. So in this case, there is a combination of graphene, molybdenum disulfide heterostructure on the tip of the fiber, and this is used to detect ascorbic acid, that is well known as vitamin C, and they demonstrated that this heterostructure can be used as photoelastic transducer to assess the concentration of this target as a function of the current in these devices. Then, still related to chemical sensing, in the last 2 years, there is another rising star, I can say, so the possibility of using optical fiber sensor to monitor the battery so the parameter inside the battery and apply this kind of device to energy application. So essentially, we can monitor the mechanical and thermal routine of the battery during the charge and the discharge process. We can monitor the internal environment of the electrolyte, so the health and the deterioration status of this battery in terms of electrochemical processing. We can also monitor what is occurring at the interface between the electrode and the electrolyte, so the change of the concentration of the ions and the creation of not wanted residue that damage the batteries and the routine of the batteries. This is one of the most first example when the authors inserted into three electrode batteries, a fiber Bragg grating coated, tilted fiber Bragg grating coated with gold. And in this case, they monitoring the charge discharge process and also the concentration of the ion during the routine of the batteries. Most interesting is it is not only possible to monitor the electrochemical activity, but by deriving the optical signal in time, we can have some signal that have some peaks in the spectrum, which is related to the creation of specific components that can be used as parameter to monitor the health of the batteries. This is another example where the tilted fiber bracket with gold is attached between the interface between the electrode and the electrolyte to monitoring lithium metal batteries and how this battery can create interfacial species concentration and also to monitor the mass transport of the compounds. Let's move to the last types of sensor, so biosensors. In this case, the most interesting final use of the device, optical fiber device, is for the development of in vivo devices and also point of care devices. In this idea, what it turned out to be fundamental is the combination between optical fiber with nanomaterial and surface engineering to have very high performance in terms of binding between the bioreceptor and the analyte. One example is related to a collaboration I have with University of Aveiro in Portugal, when we and the University of Naples Partenope here in Italy, when we developed a Lompidon grating in a double cladding fiber, and we also cover with graphene oxide layer to have enhancement of the performance and also have directly binding groups to the surface. And in this case, we monitoring the activity, the cortisol level, which is fundamental in recirculating aquaculture system. And we get a detection limit which is below what is required in these systems. Here, the example where we retrieve the calibration curve, we have the specificity test, and also we monitoring the stability of the signal. Another interesting example that was applied to detection of cancer cell. The system is based on fiber optic ball resonators. And those ball resonators actually measure the reflected light from the optical blast scatter reflectometer of the ball. And in this case, the author applied this interesting configuration for the detection of CD42, which is an overexpressed biomarker in breast cancer, applied directly to the detection inside of those cells with a very low detection limit in the range of cell per milliliter. Another interesting type of sensor is what is called lossy mode resonance. Essentially, we have a waveguide structure, so it can be planar or cylindrical, whatever. And when we deposit a dielectric material with specific optical feature in terms of real and imaginary part of the permittivity of this material uh, guide lights within this glossy coating, and this light that is guided can be the sensitive element with the surrounding environment. Clearly, this light that is guided within the structure is lost with respect to the core, and then at the end we have this resonance. This is called lossy mode resonance. Here, there is the comparison in terms of physical parameter between lossy mode resonance and SPR devices. Essentially, LMR are excited with metal oxide or polymeric material. LMR has a lot of advantages in comparison to SPR because both polarization state of light can be used in the sensing. The spectral position, the resonance can be very broad in terms of spectral tuning from the visible to the near infrared region. And also there is the possibility of excited more than one independent resonance within the same transmission spectrum. And this makes very benefiting in terms of optical fiber devices. By using this sensing configuration and by using tin oxide as the electric material, we developed a fiber device that was used to test the concentration of total tau protein, which is an hallmark in Alzheimer's disease, using sub-microliter artificial cerebrospinal fluid sample. We do all the tests in terms of optimization of blacking aging to avoid non-specific interaction. We study the complexity of the matrix using different types of matrices, and we retrieve the calibration curve, and also we tested the unspecific level of the signal. With this system, we are able to have a detection limit in the order of picomolar, with a very broad detection range. Here you can find all the statistics we perform by using not only diluted CSF sample but also undiluted CSF samples. Recently, we have published a very innovative device where we are able for the first time to detect two biomarkers on parallel within the same sensing region by simply creating a stepwise structure that excited two lossy mode resonance at the same time and using the same tin oxide material with a different nanostructure. The idea is to create a locally functionalized region where in the first part we can detect one biomarker, and the second part we can detect a second biomarker. In this case, we apply this device for the detection of two inflammatory biomarkers, which are CRP and D-dimer, and we can see that the fluorescence signal from one target is completely distinguished between the other, and here we create all the sensorgram and the calibration curve from which we can say that we can for sure able to detect concentration below microgram per milliliter. Still continues on the Alzheimer's disease, we also use another type of sensor, tether fiber bracket coated with gold, and we developed a custom multi-channel microfluidic system to detect multiple AD biomarker at the same times. Here we focus on different form of beta amyloids 42, which is one classical biomarker in AD, and we studied those biomarkers in CSF from animal sample. And also we are able to distinguish between the form of monomeric and oligomeric from those biomarkers by simply study the binding kinetics of the interaction of those biomarkers. Here you can see the difference between the binding uh, during the oligomer and during the monomer, and also the response in terms of sensitivity is completely different. This allows us to distinguish between them, and this is the regeneration, multiple regeneration of the device. In this case, we retrieve a detection limit with concentration in the tens of picogram per milliliter, which correspond of molarity below picomolar, which is very interesting for the onset of Alzheimer's disease, and we get the cover of Advanced Science in 2024. Another interesting example using fiber Bragg gratings in the form of tip of a fiber is the possibility to use this device to like a point of care device studying sample from patients, and this device, which consists of two Bragg gratings, one in the standard region of the fiber to monitor temperature and the other on the tip of the fiber to monitor the concentration of a biomarker, was used to detect placental growth factor parameter, which is fundamental in preeclamptic patients, which is a very severe multi-organ complication that affect pregnant woman and infant during the pregnancy. With this device, we tested using a sample from patients, and we can first retrieve the calibration curve from which we get a detection limit which is very below the early detection of placenta growth factor to avoid preeclampsia. You can see we can distinguish between the standard condition and the preeclamptic condition. And also we can retrieve a kind of standard threshold to distinguish between healthy patient and preeclamptic patient, and we get a very interesting specificity outcomes. Another interesting example is to use optical fiber combined with hydrogel matrix to engrave and trap some neurochemical receptor on the tip of the fiber, and this system has been tested in vitro and in vivo for the detection of three different neurochemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, adenosine triphosphate under different physiological and pathological conditions, and tested in brain of mice and rats. The second big breakthrough in this concept was the came out in 2022, so recently, from Professor Yang Ran and the fiber sensor group led by Professor Guan in the Jinan University in China, with the concept of fiber optic theranostics. So the use of functional optical fiber mediated plug and play probes for precise tumor theranostic and performing in vivo sensing. Why this was a breakthrough? Because this type of device based mostly on fiber sensing allow to penetrate more inside the tissue rather than the standard approaches, and this can be also combined with precision delivery of drug and local treatment like photothermal therapy. And this finally allowed to develop in vivo endoscope for cancer sensing and therapy. This is one of the recent example where there was a synergy approach for tumor photothermal therapy and chemotherapy. So there was like a photothermal agent that use chemotherapy and also do the photothermal activity by heating the tumor at the same time. And this device essentially is based on a Mach-Zehnder interferometer and fiber Bragg grating to monitor temperature, combined with erbium dopant fiber that allow with the pump laser to heating the tumor. Here we can see that this has been tested on animals, applied to HepG2 cell line, which is typical in a liver tumor, and this approach allowed to dramatically killing the tumor till the complete elimination. Following the previous study, the same group developed a fiber trip probe that are used to monitor the pH of the tumor microenvironment. The monitoring of this parameter is fundamental because it's allowed to localize the tumor and also to have feedback of the tumor, because you know acidic environment of the tumor have a pH around 5 to 5.5, while healthy tissue has a physiological pH more than 7. So the determination of this parameter is fundamental not only to localize the tumor but also to have feedback after the treatment of the tumor. And this probe combined with a hydrogel method to monitor the pH and been tested in vivo with animals, and we can see that we can easily discriminate the pH depending if we are inside the tumor or in healthy tissue. All those works was combined, and in collaboration with me, we have recently published in Life Science Application, still not online, but it will be soon, this paper when we developed a multifunctional fiber optic theranostic probe for closed loop tumor photothermal therapy. So taking the advantages of wavelength emission multiplexing technology, we can excite different wavelength and then using different functionality within the same single optical fiber tip probe. Specifically, we co-immobilize a pH indicator, a temperature indicator, a photothermal agent with a node overlap at excitation bed on the tapered optical fiber. And this system allows for the pre-treatment of the tumor by tumor age identification through revealing the tumor pH gradient. The intra-treatment, so photothermal agent acting as a heat source for photothermal therapy, while simultaneous temperature monitor enable precise tumor thermal dose control. And final, post-treatment, so rapid efficacy assessment using real-time monitoring of the change of the pH in the tumor microenvironment. This probe was also showed a very high biocompatibility and very low cytotoxicity, which make the translation in clinical setting quite easily. Here are the example of the response we get, so you can see that we can really localize the specific region of the tumor from center to margin to surface and also to healthy tissue. This is for the intra-treatment when we increase the temperature to kill the tumor by the local heating, and was the reverse in the pH when there is the tumor and when the tumor starting to be killed. And it was applied to colorectal tumor in mice. Finally, I will give you some food for thought, some idea for young students, but also from senior people working in this field. So where we are going in the field. So for sure, we are looking for novel nanostructure, novel material, novel shapes of the material, all novel sensing concept. Another interesting example is related to development of wearable sensor based on flexible material, hydrogel fiber, composite material, or multi-sensing approaches. Clearly, the progress related to micro nanofabrication into optical fiber, but in general also applied to chip or silicon planar sensors, has increased a lot the possibility for this kind of devices. Another important thing, especially for the translation for real world deployment of the device, is the packaging that should not be underrated. So the possibility for scalability, portability, and make a device which is as much as compact as possible. Another important that we recently studied and was published 2 years ago in Advanced Science is the possibility of improving the performance by improving the optical shape of the resonances. So that is that if you want to get really detection limit below femtomolar, so reaching really with the optical fiber device attomolar range or even zeptomolar range, what we need to do is to have a resonance which is as much deep as possible, but at the same time as much narrower as possible. And this increase the resolution in the detection. So the idea to decrease the bandwidth and also the increase the depth of the resonance belong is related strictly to the material that are involved in the construction of the device. Here we experimentally showed that by creating a 1D photonic crystal structure with the composition stucco layer with low and high refractive index, but importantly, very low losses, we can create optical resonance which is not only very sensitive, but also can get very low detection limit in the range of attomolar. We firstly showed that it's possible to get attomolar range with such optical fiber device. Another important intriguing point, and coming from this article which I read recently, is the concept of load. As I told you before, sometimes we need to achieve performances very, very rich in the stream, so in the very, very low concentration range, so attomolar, zeptomolar, whatever. But sometimes this is not meet the practical need in application. So sometimes it's not fundamental to reach a very low detection limit, but maybe it's more important to focus on the working range, the easiest to use, the reproducibility of the result. So in general, it's not only to get the lowest detection limit, but also a balance between technological advances, but also practical utility, considering cost effectiveness, sustainability, and compliance with the standardization. Finally, I will just have a brief time dedicated to the role of artificial intelligence, which is spreading all around our world. So, what can we envisage from AI-driven sensor, and what AI contribute effectively to optical sensor? You know that AI is a supportive technology, okay? It's not really intelligent. The human are intelligent. The technology can be made intelligent by human. But what that this technology can help a lot is in the data analysis and data processing. So this can analyze vast data set, identify quite easily some patterns to make decision, recognize speech, or generate content. And this is based on deep learning technology on different types of algorithms. So in general, we create a kind of workflow for applying AI to optical sensing system. The first step involves the pre-processing. So what we call the data acquisition, that can be what we get from the sensor, so the full spectrum, all the parameter we get, okay? And then the data pre-processing is done by denoising the system, baseline correction, anomaly detection, or signal normalization. Then there is the AI model. So in general, we can develop or create algorithms specifically for the application, and this can create like a multi-target quantification. We can do weak signal enhancement, we can do regression model, or other type of algorithm. And finally, the deployment using evaluation metrics to effectively evaluate with some calculated parameter the robustness and the generalization of the model up to the final implementation by using the technology related to Internet of Things and cloud station, workstation, whatever, to have long-term performance optimization. Last slide is related to what I call take-home message. First, is clearly that is need a uniform and a standardized metrics for performance assessment of the device. So clear definition of the parameter, a clear way to calculate those parameters. Second, we should have a device that possesses very long-term stability. Hopefully days, weeks, months, to have a limited signal degradation didn't make possible easy the translation to the market. Then this is another important parameter, the possibility of reusability and regeneration of the device. Finally, we need to carefully assess all the environmental cross-sensitivity and also produce schemes to correct those cross-sensitivities. And finally, it's also important to have validation of the device in real biofluids, eventually in animal or human sample, and also mitigation strategy in case of low performance in real condition. At the end, another parameter that should be taken into account is the reproducibility and the batch-to-batch variation, and it makes the translation in the market and also allow a uniform calibration, standardization of the process. Okay, we are at the end. So first of all, I would like to thank Leonardo for for chairing this webinar, and Carlos as a coordinator of the optical sensor cluster for this very interesting initiative, all the IEEE sensor council, the IEEE optical sensor cluster members, all the people that have been involved in managing the webinars. I would also thank all the funding agencies that contribute to my research activity in the last 5 years. So not only Italian contribution, but also coming from outside. And clearly, thank all of you for the kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavaioli, for the very insightful, comprehensive, and clear presentation and talk. So now the floor is open for question. We already have some question from Sanjar Korgambayev in the chat that I will read. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Could you elaborate more about the main advantage of fiber optic biosensor over photon integrated circuits based biosensor? This is the first question.
Okay, I think in any place that where I do like kind of this lecture seminar, this is this $1 million question. So how the fiber optic technology can compete with mature and very well-known platform like optical circuits, silicon, photonics, in general, planar devices. From my point of view, the two flagship of this technology can be in vivo sensing, which is very, I can say, remarkable by using optical fiber device, because optical fiber device are very easy to handle, very lightweight, can be make robust for in vivo application, and also this can allow, as I told you in this one of the slide, that this make the penetration of the light more deep in the tissue. So this is not from my side. This will be the new venue for in vivo sensing, especially in the new types of therapies for tumor cancer, cell analysis, epigenetics, whatever. And this can be really probably the most important application using optical fiber biosensing. Another things that I started having experience in this topic is the using of optical fiber sensor for in energy system, so battery management system. So it is quite easy to insert in, and again, this provide a bunch of parameter, electrochemical, physical parameter that can be used for the assessment of the batteries, because now batteries are everywhere, not only in like a photovoltaic solar panel, but also in the cars for the electric car, or electric. There is electric everywhere, so it will be fundamental to monitor the status and the health of this battery, and this is possible quite easily with optical fiber sensor. So,
Okay.
from my point of view, those two will be the future of optical fiber devices.
Regarding kind of same topic, a follow-up question was like, what do you think about large-scale production of fiber optic sensor? I assume it can be more limited compared to photonic integrated circuits production that could make fiber optic sensor less attractive for commercialization, especially biosensing. What do
This
you
is
think about it?
this is true. Currently, is true. I cannot say uh, no. Again, the other types of technology are really more mature than optical fiber technology, especially applied to biosensing or the last idea of using into the batteries. The point is that if we can create, and this is one of the mission also from my side and also from the this webinar, if we have standardized procedure to have the characterization of the device, the calculation of the parameter. This makes also the comparison easier, and also and this can be make easier the translation. Clearly, there
Yeah,
are 2 points that should be is there still are challenges in this field. One is the reproducibility. So have device that different device that measure the same type of parameter that can provide similar performance.
yeah,
Is it quite challenge?
yeah, sure.
And the other is to batch variation, which is related to reproducibility. This is not still not compatible with the other types of technology. But for instance, in the case of the paper we have recently published in Light,
Hmm.
this type of fiber probe inserted into the animals, we developed like 100 fiber probe, and we tested into, can say, more than 10 mice,
Mm,
and
yeah.
this give a
Wow.
similar response,
Okay. Yeah.
and so make things easier in the future. But clearly there are still challenges.
Sure. We have also another question. Thank you very much. We have another question from Professor Paula Sacomandi, which raised her hand. So feel free to unmute yourself if you wanna ask for a question or use the chat as you prefer.
Probably she is like only viewer, so she cannot unmute.
Yeah, I think I can unmute her.
Yes, now.
Yes, should be
Okay.
working.
Hi, Francesco.
Hi,
Hi.
Paola.
Thanks a lot for your great talk. Really, very, very interesting. I have two practical questions. You have shown three different methods for calculating the limit of detection. Okay, the
Mhm,
third one you clearly explained that it's not valid method. But regarding the first two,
mhm.
um, which one is the best, or have you ever compared the results from the two methods? So are
Uh,
they in agreement?
Okay, basically, thank you first. Thank you, Paula, for the very interesting question from meteorological point of view. And these two methods are being standardized by two different society, because one came from ACS, so Analytical Chemical Society, so from an analytical people. The other comes from UPAC, which is more engineering standardization society. But in general, what I found from my studies that if you are able, and it is very strong hypothesis, especially in fiber sensing, to repeat the experiment at least 4 or 5 times. Okay, and you use the two methods, the outcomes are quite similar. So this
Mm,
means that the two methods are similar if we are able to reproduce a data set of repeated experiment greater than 3 times.
okay.
Because the first method ask for doing the experiment, especially for the blank measurement, from 7 to 10 times, and then create along this very close to the suspected LFD, like 5 to 10 concentration, which is not easy. Okay. The second one is more realistic, especially in case optical fiber sensor, because if you can do the experiment, I can say 2 or 3 times, you have comparable value that can be fitted within the same calibration curves. This make the reproducibility and to batch variation quite the reproducibility very high and batch to batch variation very low. And so this is the way you should proceed. Usually, to be reliable and effective, you should have at least 3 times repeated experiment, at least. If you
Mhm.
can do this with different sensor the same type that involve reproducibility, I think you can be quite safe for using both method with the same way.
Okay, clear. Thank you. Thank you. And the other curiosity I had was this one when you presented the selectivity, specificity,
Mm?
indexes, let's say parameters, you mentioned about these anti-fouling polymer brushes. So
Mhm.
there, again, I think that, so can you say more about these
Okay.
brushes, these
Yeah.
materials?
This was a kind of project that is finished in 2025. I had with the Czech Republic Academy of Sciences, and especially the Institute of Physics with Professor Anna Lizalova in Prague, and they are expert on biointerfaces, specifically anti-fouling polymer brushes that can be make it customs, a lot of customs. And usually these are kind of, you can see like a tree, okay? And you can modify the last part of this tree depending of a balance between the anti-fouling effect, so the capability of repelling not specific molecule, and also the binding capacity of these coatings. Clearly, this is quite useful when you want to develop devices where you need to detect the target analyte in complex biofluids, like especially like blood plasma, serum, where the complexity is very high. And what we have. Retrieve from these projects that in case of plasma, which is quite complicated for fiber sensor, we can able to have almost negligible effect of the matrix, the plasma matrix. So we are able to improve a lot the specificity. Clearly, this depends on the specific coating of these anti-fouling brushes, so how we can make it custom. In the first year, we tried to optimize this cocktail by using the approach that they are using since a lot of years. But the problem is that that approach was not more very suitable with the fiber sensor. You know, fiber sensor is a piece of fiber that should be at least 10 centimeter. And we need to put this into a big reactor. This means because the cleaning procedure to polymerize these foolings, the coatings is extreme. You have to be super clean. And
Okay.
all this process to make it the polymerization of these coatings takes a lot of time. And especially if we have a very big reactor, you need to use a lot of
Volume.
volumes, really a
Mm,
lot. And this makes quite unsustainable.
mm, mm,
What
mm.
we have developed in the last year of the project, and we are going to submit this, I can say, remarkable outcomes quite soon. So the manuscript is ready; it should be submitted. We are developed a custom-made macrofluidic based on cylindrical reactor or the same dimension of the fiber when we put the fiber inside. And in this case, we can do the same steps by using at least 100 times less volumes. And this
Oh,
makes the procedure quite sustainable and quite effective. And we tested by detecting a biomarker for Alzheimer in plasma, directly in plasma, and we get a great improvement in terms of sensitivity.
okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, they're very
Amazing
important
stuff.
outcomes. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Thank you, Francesco, and
Thank you,
congratulations.
Paula. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much again to Dr. Cavaioli for the very nice talk. Also, if you have other questions, feel free to contact like on the
Yeah.
mm, optical sensor cluster website. We also have like the details of the talk and further information. So once again, thank you to the speaker, Dr. Cavaioli.
Thank
Thank you
you.
to all the participants and see you at the next webinar or the activities. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Have
Thank
a
you so
nice day
much.
ahead. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
talk.
you.